All right, welcome in Tuesday edition, section 1904. Thanks for being in the section with us. And what a way to get rolling on a Tuesday. You know, it felt like old times where I was watching a Padres San Francisco Giant game on a Monday night. And I was watching, just the way the blueprint was. It was having El Ministro de Defensa, the Minister of Defense, out there at third base making play after play after play to help save a game for the San Diego Padres. Except, wait a second. Then I put my glasses on and I realized that was not Manny Machado. That was not Machado playing third base. No, in fact, that was Jose Iglesias. Welcome in, everybody. Tuesday on Section 1904. John, good afternoon or good morning or whenever people are listening.
Good morning, Darren. To your point, I met up with a friend at a bar last night, and I was like, let's meet at a bar that'll have the Padres game on. So we went to Pretzels and Pints, which I know you were a big fan of when you lived in the North Park area. Went down there, had a few beverages, and the game was on. In the corner, it was muted. They was playing music and everything. And, I was keeping an eye on it, keeping an eye on the score, who's pitching. Every so often, I'd see a replay. It was not until this morning, Darren, that I realized that person making all those plays at third base was not Manny Machado. I assumed it was, I literally watched replays where he's gunning the guy down at home, and he's starting the double play to end the inning and get out of, the bases loaded jet. The whole time, my brain, I guess because I was on the other side of the bar, TV's kind of small, my brain just assumed it was Manny Machado, and it wasn't until I read Kevin Acee this morning talking about all the different defensive plays that Jose Iglesias made before he knocked in the only run with a sac fly in the 10th inning, and I was like, oh, that's who was doing all that. Good for him.
It is funny. It is very funny that you say that because you and I have not communicated much. Usually we chat for a little bit via text. Maybe we chat for a little minute to warm up the vocal cords before we actually hit the record button.
Yeah.
When we get section 1904 going. And I did post this into the Discord. I was very active on the Discord last night. I floated around to a lot of different categories there and posted a bunch of stuff. And I did the same thing. So I had something going on. I had the game on. I said, hey, listen, this is one of the games. I feel like I've been neglecting the Padres a little bit with some of the SDFC stuff that I had. Barely caught any over the weekend. I said, this is a game that I'm going to start watching in the first inning, and I'm not going to stop watching until the game is over, whenever that might be. And almost 3 hours later.
There's no other sports either. There's no NBA playoffs. There's no soccer. There's no nothing. Yeah.
Right. As a matter of fact, second, third inning, I was questioning this decision. So much so that I sent a text to John. I was like, maybe I'll watch a replay of the Champions League final because this isn't doing it for me. This is tedious watching these umpires and these delays and these reviews. What's going on here? This is aggravating. This is annoying to me. So I did send John a text. I was like, I might regret this, but I'm going to stick with it. And I'm glad that I did. But, this is what we've come to expect from the hot corner, right? I mean, just game-changing defensive plays. But like you, I was watching the game without sound in the first inning. I was sitting in my upstairs living room, had the TV on, and I had my laptop out, and I was doing a little bit of work. I had some stuff that I just needed to do. Doesn't matter what I was doing, but I had the sound off, and I looked up, and the bases were loaded, and I saw a ground ball hit the third, and the third baseman throws the ball home, and I said to myself internally, I was like, man, Manny does that better than anybody. he does that better than anybody, doesn't he? And I put my head back down, and I went back to whatever it was that I was working on. If you really want to know, I was looking up some of the Club America statistics. Not that we're going to get the A squad this Saturday, but still. Anyhow, and then, the double play, and I was like, oh, man, what an inning. What an inning for Manny. I'm so glad that we don't have to talk about it, an 11th error for Manny Machado. And then it took me a couple of innings to realize that it was Iglesias out there. And I was like, wow, what a nice luxury to have. I don't know that I realized it until the two teams got into a little bit of a banter back and forth, and it appeared like there was some tension. And some of the Padre players came out of the dugout, and I saw Manny Machado wearing a brown jacket. And, normally a starter's not going to sit around in a jacket in between innings. So I said, well, wait a second here. And that's when I realized it was Iglesias, who then made another brilliant play late in the game. I think it was the 10th inning, where this ball comes screaming off the bat, 110 miles per hour, I think it was. And, he's standing there. He's close to the bag. Runner standing on third. He fields it. He gets it across. I mean, just, wow. What a enjoyable game that turned out to be. I didn't have high hopes through about 2-3 innings that this one would actually keep the attention on a Monday night. But John, I can admit it. I was wrong, and I was happy that I was wrong. And I was happy that there was nothing else to take me away from my commitment to Padres and Giants on Monday night. I'm glad that it didn't fire up the Champions League final so that I could watch PSG just pummel Inter Milan again. So I'm glad that I stuck with it. It was actually a kind of a rewarding game to watch all the way through.
Yeah, I'll give you an old guy reference here in a second that I think you were around for. Maybe not. This is the second time in a row where in the first few innings of a Stephen Kolek start, I'm talking shit because he seems terrible. And last time I did it in the Discord, I've backed off from that. This time I just did it in a text message to you. And I was like, none of this matters because Kolek's on the mound. He's loading the bases. He's going to give up a truck full of runs. It's over. And Stephen Kolek, once again, 5 2/3, only 3 strikeouts, but he got out of every jam. And I saw his post-game quotes where he was like, I'm a ground ball pitcher, and I was able to get ground balls whenever I got into a jam. The fact that he now repeatedly seems to get kind of tagged or doesn't have his control right in the first inning or two, but then he like figures it out and he gets into a rhythm and he just starts getting ground ball after ground ball after ground ball. Feels... do you remember Joey Hamilton?
I do.
He was on the 98 Padres team, and I that was my first year of like falling in love with baseball, season tickets, all that stuff. And I just remember Joey Hamilton at like every start of his going into it being like, as long as he can get through the first couple innings and get into his rhythm, he's going to be okay. But sometimes he'd give up 5 runs in the first inning. And sometimes he'd settle down and sometimes he wouldn't. Last time I think Kolek did that, right? He gave up like 6 runs and settled down and ended up getting the win. In this one, kind of the same, except he didn't give up those runs, partially because of Iglesias. So, good win for the Padres. It sounds like, I was reading a little bit this morning, it sounds like the Giants offense has been in a really bad place the last week or two. So, these are two kind of struggling offenses. The pitchers and the defense took advantage, and that's how you get a 1-0 win.
Yeah, I mean, the offense is struggling. As a matter of fact, and I'm certainly not I don't want to be doing post-game stuff.
Right.
Let's just move on.
Yeah.
Let me just say, first and third early in this game, I really thought maybe Tyler Wade should just put down a squeeze bunt rather than run the risk of hitting into a double play. And it ended up being a, strike him out, throw him out double play. So it's not exactly what I was fearful of, but if they're not scoring, maybe playing for a run isn't the worst idea in the world. So I don't know. Maybe we just think about that moving forward here. I'd be okay with that, with Tyler Wade doing that sort of stuff. You mentioned an old guy reference, by the way. I'm glad that you did, because I meant to mention this yesterday. So I was in the press box at Snapdragon Stadium on Saturday, and the guys from San Diego Punta Football, right?
Yeah.
The old 2 balls and a mic crew.
Yep.
And it is Tony and Chiva, and Abe is one of their guys now too. And I was walking through the press box and he's like, hey, I got to say, you had the ultimate old guy reference on your podcast. And I got to say, hey, thank you for listening. But he said, when I was talking about being patient zero with the chicken pox, he said, I have no idea what grammar school is. What is grammar school? I had to look that up. And I was totally shocked that he had no idea what grammar school was. He said, we call it elementary school. I said, yeah, I understand elementary school, but literally the name of the school was Iona Grammar School. So that's why I said grammar school. But is that an old person reference, the term grammar school? I never knew that before.
I don't know if that might be an old person reference. You'll like this because this is more of a like localized West Coast, East Coast thing. I was getting into it with a friend of mine the other day because his daughter is going to an elementary school that had to change its name because the original name was named after someone who was problematic. So they went through a whole process and everyone in the school kind of got to vote and they voted on the name. And at the end of it, he was like, we should all be doing it the way New York City does it. These schools don't need to be named after people or things. Just give them a number. So, Darren, did you ever go to a number school, like a PS 115 or something like that?
I did not. None of my schools were named numerically.
Damn it.
No, sorry.
It's okay. That's just,
sorry about that.
I thought that was part of the charm of growing up in New York, is you got to go to a school without a name, just had a number.
No, they all had names. But in case anybody else was a little lost on that, and nobody took the time like Abe did to go back and look it up, grammar school is just like an elementary school. I think it was like grades 1 through 6, right? This is the way it was for me. Up until 6th grade, you were in grammar school or elementary school or whatever. 7th and 8th is junior high school. 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th is high school.
Yeah.
Does that sound right? Is that still the same? I will admit I don't know anything about this stuff.
I will tell you as a parent that it kind of depends on what school district or system you're in. Some of them go K through 6, and then middle school is 7, 8. I did K through 5, which I think my daughter is also on track to do K through 5, and then middle school is 6, 7, 8, and then high school is 9 through 12. That 6th grade year, sometimes it's part of the elementary school or the grammar school, sometimes it's part of the middle school, and it just kind of differs from wherever you're at.
All right, well, there you go. The Padres, by the way, are 3-0 against the San Francisco Giants, and that's probably tremendous news for a lot of Padre fans because, Sleepy Bob or whatever. So, I'm sure that makes everybody
I forgot about that.
In a much better mood here because, Sleepy Bob and extra innings or whatever it is. I'm losing track on that sort of stuff.
Are we watching standings yet?
I saw that the Rockies won for the 10th time
Good for
after yesterday's complete disbelief during the podcast that they still only have 9 wins. I thought I was looking at standings from a week ago, but they have picked up a 10th win. So everybody in Major League Baseball does now have double-digit wins.
Wow.
I will say just one quick thing, and I don't know that this is specific to the Padre game, but it is motivated by what it was that we saw in the Padre game about instant replay. I'm ready to move on. I just think oftentimes I would really trim down the amount of instant replay that we have in all of our sports. And I talk about this a lot in soccer, that a lot of these calls are still judgment calls. They are still judgment calls. And I know I've said I'm not going to moan about the penalty kick called on Yepe forever, but I will use that as an example, that was a judgment call. The fact that MLS doesn't have goal line technology but still allows video reviews of subjective plays, to me, doesn't sound great. That Major League Baseball, I'm fine with replay for the very, very basic things. Was the ball fair, foul? Was it a home run? Was it not a home run? Was it a goal? Was it not a goal? Was the ball in the end zone? Was it not in the end zone? Did the shot get off before the end of the shot clock, or did it not get off by the shot? I'm good with all that. I think the rest of it, John, I'm okay. I can live with the mistakes. It's tougher and tougher to watch sports these days and try to live with the mistakes when we've supposedly implemented a system to eliminate the mistakes. And I didn't see an explanation. I don't know that anybody went and spoke to the pool. Like, is there a pool reporter who can go and talk to these umpires? I think there probably should be. We haven't seen any explanation on that. It turned out not to kill the Padres, but it is it's a frustrating thing. It erodes a little bit of confidence for you as a viewer, as a fan, when you sort of see this. And I could get really nerdy about film. And I think one of the flaws of I'll get nerdy here for a second. You're making television screen is a 2-dimensional object, and you're making a 3-dimensional decision based off this 2-dimensional object. So there's going to be some flaws in it. And, the television screen will lie to you from time to time. He was out. I think he was out. I think we all would agree that he was out. Not just saying that. Everybody would objectively say that.
He was out.
He was out, and I don't understand. Maybe they have to go by the call on the field. But I'm okay, I think, as a fan. I've watched enough sports that if we don't have these kind of interruptions in our daily sports viewing, then I'm okay with it. I think let's just do the very simple things and let that go under video review. And the rest of it, we can just learn to live with it, can't we?
This is a broader conversation. I'll try not to derail us too much, but we have become a culture as American sports watchers and just Americans. We've become a grievance culture that is far too reactionary. Like, we all knew when Buster Posey broke his leg that they were going to change the rule about whether or not you could run into a catcher at home plate. We knew when Tom Brady tore his ACL that there was going to be a new rule that you couldn't tackle quarterbacks below the waist or the knees or whatever it was. because the sports are trying so hard to perfect the imperfect and to try and keep healthy these players while they play a sport that is built to break your body. And the problem is the fans get upset because they're like, the screen tells me that the ref blew that call. Why does my grievance not matter? Why does my anger not matter? I'm going to be very angry about this. And then the teams are like, well, if they could just run into Buster Posey, they're just going to run into Buster Posey. Can we change it? Well, if they could just take out Tom Brady for a whole season, they're just going to go for his knees every time. And it's like, I don't know, man. At some point, we have to admit that like these things are imperfect, and they're going to break bodies and they're going to break hearts, and that's part of why we do this. I think I told you someone said when it came to instant replay that you're trying to perfect the imperfect, and that is the best way to put it, because it's always going to be imperfect. Even with replay, it's going to be imperfect. And then it shines an even brighter spotlight on it, right? Like, I saw the call at second where the guy was clearly out and they did review and they still called him safe. I saw it blowing up this morning on TikTok on like the Bleacher Report account and like some the MLB on ESPN account. And I'm like, the fact that they missed a call, replayed it, and missed it again is now a much bigger story than the game of baseball. And it's like, I'm all for like make the umps a much smaller part of this game for me. I don't need to know their names. I don't need to hear their voices. They're there to make calls. And yeah, I agree in places where you can use judgment and it's clearly black or white. I've been watching a lot of French Open. I love when the judge jumps down from his chair and goes and checks where
it's
the ball...
It's the best replay. It's the best replay in sports because it's such a simple thing. It's either in or it's out. That's it.
Yeah. And like
it hit the net or it didn't hit the net. That's it.
When they come down off the chair and they literally point to it and they're like, oh, you can see the mark where it was. It was clearly out. I'm like, that's great. Do that all day. That's fantastic. But yeah, they're like, well... The glove was on him. Did his foot pop off? Did you see the guy who I think it was George Springer the other day? He like got to third on a triple and then he was excitedly bouncing on third and the third baseman just held the glove to his back. And one of the times he bounced, he got up off the base and then he was out. And it's like, come on. Like,
is that what we're doing here? I mean, is that really what replay was for? Is that the egregious mistake that we're looking to correct in sports? I'm with you. I agree. I think sometimes, when we're questioning what people's intent was, and you're asking somebody looking at a screen to try to evaluate what intent was, whether it's a handball or jump, all that sort of stuff, I just think we can get rid of it. We learn to live with the mistakes of the athletes. We learn to live with the mistakes of the people who are making the calls, whether it's an umpire or a coach or whatever. I think we can just, or whether it's a coach or a manager or whatever. I just think we can learn to live with the mistakes every once in a while of the human beings who, by the way, get it right way more often than they get it wrong, rather than subject us to this. Well, what are they looking at without any sort of explanation in the sport? Or, what was he trying to do with his hands if there's a handball called somewhere inside of the... I just think... Or, what was he doing? Was it where his feet shut? Were they set? Were they not in basketball? Right? Like, there's all these different examples where you're asking somebody still to make a judgment call. The whole purpose of replay was to say, let's get to the black and white of this all. It's either this or it's that. Tennis is such a great example because the ball, there is no, well, what was he trying to do with the serve?
Yeah, where were his feet?
Yeah. You're like, well, was it out? That's it. And I think with sports, the other sports here, where there's a million more plays and, there's a million more things that you could potentially review, maybe less would be more here. Was it a home run? Was it fair? Was it foul? Like, that's all I really need. That's all I really need. And, I mean, nobody wants to see, a bad call, but we're not even guaranteed that the calls are going to be corrected accurately anymore in all of these sports. And I mean this, like in all of these sports, this isn't just, what was the Padres? I hate talking about umpires. I hate talking about referees because I think it's loser talk for the most part when you're starting to blame referees or umpires or whatever. It is. But, this isn't about that. It's about, like, video just doesn't seem to be consistently doing the things I think that it was intended for, that people hoped it would do. And I question why we're continuing to use it for all of these things and expanding the role of replay, it feels like, all the time in sports.
It's just reaction. It's just reaction to someone's grievances. Now, well, the fans are pissed off that, we got this one call wrong in the playoffs last year, so we got to change how the sport deals with those types of plays forever and ever. And we need to slow down the game, and we need to have 30,000 people sitting around watching umpires watching a screen that no one else can see. And it's terrible. Anyway, big circle back to what I was asking you about before. We are now more than a third of the way through this Padres season. I've told you this. I don't know that I've said this on a podcast. I still have no idea who this Padres team is. Like, Stephen Kolek started a game yesterday. Today, the game's going to be started by Ryan Bergert, I think. I have no idea who the left fielder is. I have no idea who the long-term catcher is. I have no idea what the goals and philosophies of this team are. They've had some good spells. They've had some bad spells. Do you think that this has been a good season so far for the Padres? Because, and before you answer that, I will just give you why I'm asking. They're one game back of the Dodgers in second place in the NL West. They're 2 games up on the Giants for third place. The Dodgers are very much, they're the defending champs, and they're thought to be heads and tails better than every other team in baseball. And I know the Padres and Dodgers, I don't even think they've played each other yet this year.
Soon, this week.
But I see a lot of people complaining on social media about how bad this team is, and they're not going anywhere, and look at these giant holes in the roster construction and blah, blah, blah. And I look at that and I'm like, you're 1 game back of the Dodgers in June. That's okay. I think this is a good season so far, even if it's been a little bit of a roller coaster.
I can't imagine that a single person, Padre fan, wouldn't have signed up for that. What it is that you just said there. Now, again, that would be a statement made before the season started in a vacuum.
Yes.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to just put out the hypothetical here. We're going to say you're going to be tied with the Dodgers in the loss column for, first, second place NL West. Do you sign for it right now? I can't imagine everybody wouldn't have, left a vapor trail sitting there ready to sign up for that. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'm with you. And again, still to be seen how much the organization will invest in this squad. I still think that that's something that's kind of lingering out there, plus some of the injuries. I think, part of it, John, probably comes from the fragility. I know sometimes it's really a fool's errand to sit around and try to judge anything based on social media reaction, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're still getting 40,000+ people in the ballpark all the time.
Yep.
That's probably more representative of the support that the Padres have than what it is that the perceived tone of social media might be. Just my 2 cents on that. Respectfully to the people on social media, even last night on the Discord channel, it's like, Kolek sucks, he's going to fall apart. I don't know, maybe. I like Kolek. I understand he's not a 1, he's not a 2, he's probably not a 3. But I'm okay with him as a 4, as a 5. I think he's probably pretty good back there. But you can sort of sense that, there is a little bit of that doom and gloom, and I do think maybe the fragility of it is something that people live with day in, day out with baseball. Well, is Darvish ever going to pitch? And I don't know. Am I supposed to believe Michael King when he's saying clown question, bro, in the post game press conference? And what's going on with Jason Hayward? John Gennaro's asking questions about whether he ever plays again.
Oh, Kevin Acee responded to that, I think. And was
I saw that. He said he's eligible to come off the injured list, but he's still got a nagging oblique kind of situation.
Yeah, no, to your point, if they win,
I feel like everybody's waiting for the bottom to fall out of this thing. And to their credit, I don't, they haven't done that. We just saw Fernando Tatis Jr., who 2 months ago everybody would have invested their entire savings account into him winning the MVP, and now it's like, this pouty bitch, get him out of here. And he's gonna come out of this, I would think.
Yeah.
Dylan wrote about it. He wrote a little bit about the slump. I saw that John put that in your front row seat today, I think it was.
Yep.
If you're a subscriber, that arrived at 7:20 this morning, and thank you for everybody for subscribing. Do appreciate that. Front row seat today had some Padre content, had some NBA Finals content, including a deep dive on Fernando Tatis Jr. and the slump. So that arrived at 7:20. Thank you as always to John.
Some Petco Park parking information.
Parking?
Did you see that?
I did see that. I'm glad I don't park there.
That's brutal. But no, it's
I feel like people are I don't know. I feel like sometimes there's just a lot of baseball fan and the cup is always half empty.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like, they lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They lost 6 games in a row. They got swept by the Mariners and swept by the Blue Jays. And I think at that point, everyone was just like, oh, this team's not going anywhere. If they win tonight, Darren, that is 4 series wins in a row since losing 6 games in a row. I'd rather win series than games. And yeah, they'll be, at very worst, 1 game back from the Dodgers, first place in the NL West on June 3rd. Like, to your point, if it's March 28th and you're asking people, like, hey, what would you give to be 1 game back from the Dodgers and sitting in second place in the NL West on June 3rd? Be like, well, holy shit. I can't. Who did they get for left field? Because there's no way Jason Hayward's doing that.
Yeah, and they haven't had Darvish, and now King's hurt. And, I get, should have traded him when he had his highest market value. This is what the Padres get for trying to hang on to Michael King. Every loss, you find somebody like, when are they going to trade Dylan Cease? Yeah. What is this? What are they doing?
Yeah.
And you're like, hold on, guys. Hold on. Very long season. Very long. It's June 3rd. There's going to be a lot more of this.
There's like 100 games left.
I know. I guess this is the benefit of not having to do this every day. Like when I was in talk radio where you're like, what is my Padre content for the day?
Yeah.
And you sort of look and you're like, oh, this is kind of shitty. And like you don't have perspective, whereas you and I can dip in here once or twice a week and, spend an extended amount of time talking about the Padres. And the perspective is just totally different than having to do 3-4 hours of content on this every day where like I've said before, and I really realized this last summer when I wasn't working, having been around a lot of baseball people in my life, they are so negative. They are just so negative. They all hate their teams. They all have nicknames for their players that you would never want to admit publicly. So, it's just the way baseball is. It's just a tough, miserable person sport. And sometimes you really have to just get off the roller coaster, let the roller coaster go up and down, and then come back in a little bit, and your perspective's totally different.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I love guys like Jackson Merrill, because I'm like, they show up and they're just bubbly and happy and excited to be there, and I feel like they can make the sport a little less miserable for everyone else in the clubhouse. But
I also would say, John, I'm also glad the one thing, the Ghost Runner, I'm glad that is in play because those teams might have played 25 innings last night.
Agreed.
And both teams would be shot.
Agreed.
You guys, they would have to burn through their bullpens. You could ruin a season if you play enough of those 16, 17 inning games where nobody can score at all. So you can say what you want about it, and it's an affront to the game, and I can't believe it. And part of the sport is having to manage your way through 16, 17 inning games every once in a while. That's fine. I'm willing to say I think we're better off without it. Just get it into a spot. You know what I didn't realize? I guess, is I didn't realize that wins and losses were handed out based on who's on the mound late in those games. Robert Suarez got a win for that one last night, and he deserved it. He went 2 innings, so good for him. Yeah, but the Giants pitcher ended up getting he didn't allow anything. He allowed a bunt and like a sacrifice, tough loss.
I was wondering this last week when the Padres gave up the ghost runner came around to score in back-to-back innings against I think the Blue Jays. I was trying to figure out, does anyone get that run earned? Is that an earned run for any pitcher? And the answer is no.
No, not the ghost runner.
Yeah, the ghost runner comes around to score. That's a run given up, but it affects nobody's ERA at all, which I find to be kind of interesting. But I guess it'd be no different than if he ended up on second due to an error. It's just there's no error.
Right. Well, anyhow, like I said, 3-0 against the San Francisco Giants. I can't imagine people waking up on Tuesday and not feeling pretty good about themselves. Hey, coming up, and we talked a little bit about if you're a subscriber, the access that you get to the podcast during the week. Mondays are always open for everybody. It's unlocked, so not behind a paywall. The rest of the week, we give you a little bit of a preview. First couple of minutes of the podcast, John usually sets that up. Front row seat gets delivered there. The podcast gets delivered. I did an interview with Tyler Heaps, who's the sporting director at SDFC, and this was on the pregame show. I don't know how many people listen to the pregame show. It's kind of a busy Saturday night. The Padres are playing. SDFC was playing Saturday night. Lots of stuff going on. Club America, LAFC. So, there was lots of things. But these things don't get archived anywhere. So I did clear with the club. I was like, hey, if I do these interviews for the pregame show, can I run them on the podcast? They're like, yeah, cool. So if you missed Tyler Heaps, he talked a lot about just how impactful some of the international call-ups are for SDFC, with Anders Dreyer and Patty McNair and Luca De La Torre and Chucky and even Oni Valakari, who got called up by Finland, which was news that he broke to me literally during the interview. I didn't even know that. But just what it means to SDFC, I thought it was something that I hadn't really thought of. And, how great it is just for the club. This could be perceived as MLS because MLS had a reputation, or maybe even still has a reputation, that if you come and play for MLS, you're going to damage your chances of playing for your national team. This was a rumor most recently linked to Neymar, when Neymar was thinking about, or rumored to be thinking about, the Chicago Fire, that the national team said, you might be done here in Brazil if you go play MLS. And people said that about Chucky. People said, well, your career is over with Mexico. And then he got called up. Now, I haven't seen an update on his injury, so I don't even know what's happening there. I'm heading out there as soon as we're done recording. Maybe I'll have a little bit of info for later in the day or tomorrow, whatever. But I thought it was really interesting what he said, like that they had 5 players called up to the senior team, and he also had 2 players called up to the under-20s. That's really a great advertisement. I don't know. I always got made fun of for the way I pronounce that word. But it's a great advert for SDFC, is what I'm trying to say. So anyhow, that will be available for you if you are a subscriber, and be on the lookout for Tyler Heap, sporting director, SDFC.
Hey, very quick aside, because yesterday I was talking about how Chucky is kind of a small guy, and he plays a position, and he plays it in a way that could lead to injuries, right? He plays it in a very physical style. When you have a second, go to Google, go to the image search, type in Chucky Lozano injury. I was not expecting this morning when I did this. I was looking for a picture of him like sitting on the ground holding his hamstring. There are pictures of him with his cheek gashed open from someone's cleat. A picture of his, it looks like his ankle being broken when someone's stepping on it. There's a picture of him in a neck brace, like he broke his neck, and the headline under it says, Chucky Lozano loses a tooth after collision on the field. There are so many pictures of this guy getting seriously injured playing football this way that I think I've been confirmed correct that if he is injury prone, it's because he's a smaller guy who plays soccer in an incredibly physical way. And look, I'm looking at some of these and they're terrifying. Like the thing where his cheek got gashed open with the cleat is terrifying. The fact that he's still willing to play football this way is a testament to his bravery. I think I would back off and start playing a slightly less physical. But no, I mean, this guy seems like he gets injured a lot because he just is willing to put himself on the line for whatever the team needs. So
well said. And I think I read before the start of the season. My apologies.
No, you're good. I was done.
Yeah, I clicked off. So one of the things I read before the start of the season was, from people that have been following some of the media that covers the Mexican national team, that have been following Chucky since he was a youth player at Pachuca. And, I don't have the data right in front of me, but I remember reading this. I want to say it was John Arnold who writes a briefing called CONCACAF. But he wrote a little bit about Chucky, and part of the story with him is the style of play. And the style of play leads him to be one of the most foul players, if not the most foul player in all of the leagues where he's played. At one point or another, whether it's been in Liga MX, whether it's been in the Netherlands, whether it's been in Italy, he has been, top player, like one of the top players fouled in each of these leagues. So, it's the style, it's the speed. Defenders can't really keep up with him. He's regularly amongst the league leaders in fouls drawn. So, that's not James Harden. This is a little bit different here where it's physical. He goes down. John just mentioned it. You can do the image search. You can find a picture of him with his face ripped open, with his ankle broken in two, with him being stretchered off the field. This is just part of who he is as a player. And, it's continuing here. So I'm actually going to be speaking with Marcus Ingvartson a little later on to talk about, psychology of what it's like being an injured player to miss so much time. So just to get a little bit of insight, because, we all think about injuries in terms of what it means physically, but the mental toll that it takes on athletes, I always think is a little bit underrated. Everybody thinks, well, this must be a holiday. It must be great. This guy doesn't have to play for 2-3 months or whatever the case might be. But, mentally, having to deal with watching your team go out there, whether they win or lose. It's still a mental mind fuck oftentimes, because when you're losing, you're like, I should be out there helping. I can't. And when they're winning, you're like, oh man, they're winning without me. Like it's just you don't feel like you're a part of the team. And for these guys, the way they're wired, it's really tough. So
can I tell you my Sean Merriman story about that real fast?
Yeah.
So Sean Merriman missed a year playing with the Chargers. I think he tore his ACL, or Jeff Fisher ordered someone to tear his ACL, so he missed a year. And when he came back, he was, significantly more jacked, especially his upper body, his arms, his chest, his lats. They were just like pulsating when he came back. And he came back and he wasn't the same player. He wasn't the dominant pass rusher that he had been in the past. And I know someone out there is saying steroids right now, and that's fine. But I talked with him about it, and I said, I noticed you came back with way more upper body muscle than you left with. And I was like, were you just so tortured with the idea of, I want to contribute to this team, and there's nothing I can do except work out and try and get in the best shape possible, but you had the lower body injury, so you're just focusing on upper body? And he was like, that's exactly what I was doing. And I was like, and I feel like that slowed you down and you lost flexibility as a result of that. And he's like, that's exactly what happened. And he was like, would I like to go back and say I'll do it differently? He's like, yeah. He's like, but every single day, my team was on the field trying to get better. And he's like, what was I going to do? Watch more film? He's like, I wanted to get better. So I just like, I'll get in the gym. I'll get in the gym. I'll get in the gym. And he's like, at the end of the day, like I overdid it. I did too much, and it really ended up hurting me. So yeah, the struggle of like, what am I if I'm not on the field with my teammates is real.
Yeah, I think so too. And I've always thought that was it's just something I never really thought of, because I think oftentimes it's easy to feel like when a player gets injured, or if a player isn't quick to get back to the field, oh, well, it must be great to be getting paid all this money and not have to do anything, especially when you're guaranteed money. But it's not, it's oftentimes not the case, like not even close. And these guys really struggle with it. And it reminds me, John, of something that I did want to bring up, and there's no real easy segue on this one, but I know it's something that you and I got a text from Marty about this, actually. There is a former television personality whose name is John Brenkus. And John Brenkus was a really, really unique person and had a really unique angle to sports. John Brenkus created a segment which turned into a television show called Sports Science. And I know you and I are thinking the exact same thing here about John Brenkus, because I saw just a couple of days ago, Marty sent me a text, and she's like, I am blown away by this news. And John Brenkus I don't know what the terminology is. I know what I read on social media, and I will just go with that he lost his battle with mental health. I know, processing that in my own head, I think I know what that means, but I also want to be careful because I don't know what it means, right? And it's not something that you want to get wrong. So,
yeah.
I will just say, I know what that means in my mind. It's not that I'm afraid to say what it is that I'm thinking, but I just want to be absolutely sure because it's kind of sensitive. But John Brenkus, who I did not even realize was battling any sort of mental health issues, and then even finding an interview that he did with Marcellus Wiley, where he addressed that and talked about how in 2019 he was suicidal and felt like he had come through really, really well on the other side. This is a guy that I got to interview a handful of times, mostly on the radio, but the one time that I interviewed him in person was one of the most memorable, and I say this sincerely. I've done a million interviews on Radio Row at however many Super Bowls it's been. I've lost count. And the interview that we had with John Brenkus, when we were talking sports science with him, and then Michael Irvin, the playmaker, that Michael Irvin, randomly is walking by our set, sees John Brenkus, sits down at the table, puts on the headphones, and says, I need to talk to you because what you're doing with sports science is fascinating to me. And they had the best conversation that I think I've ever heard on Radio Row. I just sat back and listened. John Brenkus, Sports Science, Michael Irvin, two people who you wouldn't partner up and think, yo, that's going to be an amazing conversation. had the most amazing conversation ever. I wish I still had access to that audio so that we could use it here. But John, I think you were there. You were working at a different radio station in Los Angeles. For whatever reason, you were hanging around that day. We were just connecting as former colleagues. So you had a chance to listen to that as well. I got a couple of messages about that interview. And it's not just about the interview. Obviously, I feel terrible for John Brenkus, who I haven't spoken to in years. And I feel terrible for his family. And obviously this gives you some perspective and makes you think about other people in your life, et cetera, all that sort of stuff. But, I just think, and I couldn't believe that other people had reached out to me and said, I remember that interview on your station with Brenkus and Michael Irvin, just talking to each other for what felt like 15, 20 minutes about leverage and about arm extension and all that sort of stuff. It was such a great conversation. It was so entertaining. It was so informative and just so unexpected. And I saw that news and I just felt, God, that one got me right in the heart hearing the news about John Brenkus.
Okay, first of all, same. And John Brenkus was a guy that I always admired because he went about it in a different way, right? Sports Science is a different show than anything else that has ever been on ESPN. And I think before that was on Fox Sports. Just a great show, brilliant guy, really, really cool concept. This is the part that I'm very excited. I get to tell this story because I think you're going to be excited by the end of it. So if I remember correctly, I'm in the background of the video of this interview because I was several tables away at Radio Row. It's also like, I hate Radio Row, but I love Radio Row because you can occasionally get little bits of magic like this. This video still exists, Darren. It is on Marty Caswell's YouTube. It is 10 years old. As of right now, 321 views.
Huh.
I'm probably like 50 of them because I have gone back to this interview so many times and watched it because it's one thing to look at Michael Irvin and be like, oh, he's big, he's strong, he's fast and physical, and he had to fight his way out of a bad situation, and he was never going to stop fighting until he could, But to hear Michael Irvin, this is the one that always sticks in my head, the one that always brings me back to the interview, is Michael Irvin explaining to John Brenkus when he figured out that because light travels faster than sound, that instead of waiting to hear the hike from the quarterback, he would turn his head and look at when the ball came out. And when the ball came out, he would go, and he's like, normally I would get half a step before I would hear hike, but I would know the ball had been snapped. And he's like, and that gave me positional advantage and leverage over and just to hear Michael Irvin go like, I made this change to my game because light travels faster than sound is just an incredible thing to think about. Michael, like not a wide receiver in 2025 who's been pelted with analytics and all this stuff. Michael Irvin. And I love the interview. I could take the audio and post it to the end of this podcast if you want, or I could just link to it in the podcast notes so people can go watch the video of it on Marty Caswell's YouTube channel. But it does exist. It starts kind of in the middle, like right after Michael sits down, and it's 10 minutes long, but it's 10 minutes that will have you thrilled and interested. And as someone who has probably watched that video more than anybody, I can tell you'll come back to it.
Yeah, and it just was such an interesting thing because, it wasn't that like Brenkus, who's this guy, right? Like who's this sort of, brain in a jar kind of figure on these television shows is telling Michael Irvin that everything that you ever thought about how you did it is wrong, right? Because I know there's been a lot of that. There's been a lot of people in baseball in particular that come in and they're like, you are doing this wrong to these baseball players, and that's where the disconnect is. It was like this genuine curiosity between the two about, Brenkus saying to Michael Irvin, tell me about these things. And then Irvin saying, I heard you talk about that thing, and I want to know more about that. Like, there just was this natural curiosity from Brenkus, like, you are an all-time athlete. You are a Hall of Fame wide receiver. You're one of the best that ever did it. And like John said, he didn't grow up in the era of analytics or any of the modern technology that people have where you can break down game film on your phone and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, it's film room. You watch games on television, that sort of stuff. And still it was Michael Irvin, who you wouldn't expect to be a guy. You would think Michael Irvin was just this physical freak, and he was. But, that he never really had to spend a ton of time thinking about the mental part of the game. But yet there was Michael Irvin talking about, how light travels quicker than speed. And like the two of them just interacting with one another, and they were laughing, and they were talking about how Michael Irvin got away with offensive pass interference because he learned how to leverage his body in a way so that he could trick the referees into not thinking that he was pushing off when he was actually pushing off. It was just like, it was such a cool thing. And I don't know. I mean, people can just go find it if they want to find it.
I'll link it in the show notes. Just look at the podcast show notes and click on the link.
I don't want to, seem like we're trying to be opportunists here when there has been this tragedy for Brenkus and his family and all that sort of stuff. But man,
it's a good conversation.
Like just a really memorable moment, and I will admit, I hadn't really thought about Brenkus in a while. I think, when John and I talk every once in a while, it comes up if we're going out, if we have a beer, because we often laugh at how useless going to Super Bowls is and how useless most of the Radio Row content is. And it is. But this is one of those times where I always remember that fondly. And it probably made the whole week worth it. Not just because we're having this conversation today, but just because it's that was great. More of that and less of that other bullshit. And, guys just being passed through here for 5 seconds so they could promote avocados. Less of that shit and more of this shit, and maybe Radio Row actually has more value, but man, it again, and I know we just got done, and you and I spent a little time on this podcast talking about mental health awareness and all that, and it's not just a month, I don't know. I mean, this video that he did, this interview that he did a few years back with Marcellus Wiley, it's awful. It's just awful to see it. Because he seems like, the John Brenkus that everybody remembers. And, it just breaks your heart. It just breaks your heart to think that this person who described what it was like walking up to the precipice of being suicidal, and you think, oh, man, what a relief that this guy's, he's bounced back. And I suppose we're led to believe at least, with lack of information being what it is, that it was still something he was dealing with all the way up until his final days. So that was tough, and it was just a unique angle too in this world where everybody's sort of copycatish and everybody's trying to outdo each other when it comes to takes. Here's a guy who's like, I'm going to try to make things just a little bit smarter, and he did, and he accomplished that, and I give him a lot of credit for what it was that he did in sports media. So
what I found interesting when I watched the Marcellus interview, and I love Marcellus, but he was out of his depth and he knew it, so he was just trying to clear out of the way. But Brenkus just seemed so happy, right? He's telling this story about putting his head in a noose and his dog just keeping him from. The whole time he's got a smile on his face, and you feel like, oh, okay, he overcame that. But
him, you're like him, really?
Depression is a lot of times it's a disease. It's a mental disease. It's like addiction. It's it can be a chemical imbalance in your brain, or it could just be a psychological thing that you haven't learned to deal with. And the version of relapsing into depression can sometimes take you to really dark and bad places. So. Yeah, really sad that we lost someone who was, so smart and so original and trying to push things in the right direction. But yeah, take it as a sign if you're someone who's been struggling, or even someone who overcame, some sort of mental health challenge in the past. Have a network, have people you can call. Understand, that the suicide hotline it does still exist. I think they tried to get rid of it in America a couple months ago, and Canada said, hey, you can call ours. We're happy to talk to Americans and help you guys. There is someone always out there willing to talk, willing to help, and willing to get through, because look, at the end of the day, I'm sure John Brenkus was in a lot of pain, and I'm sure he left a lot of people in a lot of pain that he wishes he hadn't. So, there are people out there who loved him and cared about him, who are hurting a great deal right now. And, we wish we weren't talking about John Brenkus for this reason.
Yeah. And Brenkus, I think is, he's just a reminder for all of us, and I think we're probably later in the podcast to the point where we won't open this up. But, any of us who have ever lost anybody, you never really stop thinking about that.
Yeah.
You never really stop thinking about, well, what if I had helped? What if I had been there? What if I had made a phone call? Anybody, and again, I want to be careful here not to jump to a conclusion unless the family tells us,
Right.
But I know what we're all thinking, and we know what we've heard from him also. So, but, I have had a friend who did take his, who passed away from suicide. I know even the terminology has changed a little bit, but,
Yeah.
and it was, it was 30 years ago, and I still think about it because, like, we were all out that night, and it's like, oh man, like, what if I had been in Pat's car instead of somebody, and like, you'll never, like, I'll never, it's not like, it's not a guilt that it's just something that you never really think about. You never stop thinking about is probably the right way to say it. And it's a dark time. Like, it's, there's a lot of stuff going on out there. Listen, I don't know that yesterday that we started the podcast talking about what happened in South Park on Friday at Buena Forqueta, but, I just felt like I didn't really want to, not bring it up because, that did have an impact on the entire weekend. And it was helpful, and even reading some of the stuff today, like I think it's gone from, I'm a little angrier about some of that stuff, but it's therapeutic however it is. And whether it's that or whether it's stuff that's happening in Europe or whether it's stuff that's happening, wherever with your own families and things, it could be a dark and dreary world. Not everything is just, picking up 3 points and beating the San Francisco Giants, hopefully that's a good enough, distraction for a lot of people to take your mind off stuff and prove that there is a world outside of all the dreary things. But, it still is, feels like a very, very tough time to be processing an awful lot of information here while trying to keep up with home life and work life and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And, I appreciate you, Darren, and I appreciate our subscribers for giving us this place that we can be our authentic selves, right? And we can talk about, ICE raiding a restaurant in South Park, in the first 15 minutes of a podcast that is ostensibly about sports, right? Just because these are the things that are important to us right now. These are the things that matter to us and our communities right now. And, the Brenkus thing, it may not have even shown up on a lot of people's radar, but this is the thing that you and I have been talking about and thinking about. And, I appreciate that we have this avenue to just be real about what is going through our head, even when it's not exactly sports.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's something that was really impactful that people are still talking about here in San Diego. I mean, maybe we'll try to get one of the reporters on, but I'm reading what a county supervisor wrote. The majority of Americans believe these criminals should be deported. It's like, well, not in that neighborhood. Mm-mm. That they targeted one of the bluest parts of San Diego County to me. Maybe it doesn't feel as random as I thought it was yesterday, but I don't know. Anyhow, we'll save that for a different conversation. Mm-hmm. And that is really one of the bluest areas that you can find in San Diego. Looked it up this morning, John. About 86% voted against Donald Trump. So
the targeting of different areas has been very confusing to me. I've been kind of taking note of them, not just in San Diego but around the country, and it's just like it just seems very odd and random. I'm sure there's some reason behind it, but it seems very odd.
All right, everybody, I'm off to SDFC, so we'll be chatting with Marcus Ingvartson, putting together the SDFC midweek show. We do have guests lined up for later in the week. NBA Finals preview coming up. That will kick off tip off on Thursday, I guess, would be the right way to say that.
Yep.
But, lots going on. We appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for the support. And we will talk to you again on Wednesday. And also, Tyler Heaps will be out on its own separate post. So be on the lookout for that if you're an SDFC fan and you're a subscriber. And we'll see. Maybe I'll buckle down and give it another 9 innings tonight on the Padre game while jumping into all the different channels on the Discord. So we'll see what happens a little later on. Thank you for the support. Talk to you Wednesday.